slides. This is boring. Sure, why not?
We should work on boring things.
We should absolutely work on boring things. I mean, we should work on interesting things. Don't get me wrong. But the last two
It may be on now. Greetings, everybody. We'll start in just a second. And thank you all for being here so far. In the next couple of minutes, if you could search your souls and decide whether you are willing to serve the community by taking results of critical questions and I'm okay. You can go next door and join via MeetEcho, but I've got the list of attendees, right? So, but seriously, we do need a scribe, and that would be great. I should also mention that if we don't have a scribe, the minutes that go to the IEB and the ISG will look a lot like the ones to the right of the sign-in thing there, and that's not the message that I would want to send for a BOF that I wanted to go forward. So anyway, I will ask again after I get one last thing set up, and then we'll get started. Thank you. In the meantime, feel free to talk amongst yourselves.
The Rajan Hot Island is
Hello.
Running from this to that. And never even eating. That's mostly at the election. I think so many times. Yeah. I mean, last night I actually got. I slept from like 7 at night. Like, what would you do? Like, I made a lot of fun. Yeah, that's what we scheduled this to fill in terms of
Alrighty then. Let's get close to getting started, and I would like to welcome everyone to the VCON BOF on behalf of the VCON BOF proponents. And actually, pardon me while I scoot this way. So if you are intending to be in the VCON BOF, that is excellent. And if you're not, please do the right thing, whatever that is. So some meeting tips here. If you have not been in a session yet this week, and this is in the one slide deck for VCON that's in the data tracker. So so that's cool. And these are helpful. The big things are please wear masks unless actively speaking at the microphone, and for use of, and basically make sure that you have everything turned off, audio and video, if you're in the room, just to we avoid feedback and things like that. We are being recorded. We will be using Meet Echo for all the queue management. And these are the things upper left-hand corner on the client, on the full client, under your name, or what you get when you open up the on-site Meet Echo client. Some resources for Yokohama, just in case you don't have them. You know, well, which is a bit of a eye test, because we try to do it on one slide, but the critical things, I would say the critical thing is that you should have already seen this when you registered for this session. So I will not read it aloud here. And then the note really well slide, which basically talks about code of conduct things and the environment that we strive to maintain, that is welcoming for people of many different backgrounds, that they are treated with dignity, decency, and respect. And please do that. And if that does not happen, there's a mention of the IETF Ombudsman persons at the bottom of the slide. Reminder of the mask policy. Recommended for common areas, but not required. But we're in a meeting room. May be removed briefly for eating and drinking, but that cannot be an excuse to leave them off for long periods. Active speakers, defined as the ones who are at the front of the room speaking or presenting in mic queue, can remove their masks. More details at the bottom. And we get to our agenda. Do we need to bash the agenda in any way? I'm sorry, I skipped past it. Has anyone searched the depths of their soul and thought to yourself, I would like for this BOF to be as effective as possible and have the best results possible, and that will happen if I help take notes? I'm seeing a hand going up over there.
I'll do it, but I don't know everybody, so anybody who doesn't identify themselves will go unattributed.
Please identify yourself. Yes, exactly. And so that's number one. Number two, if you're looking at stuff on Meet Echo, like the queue and things like that, since we're using Meet Echo for all the queue management, you should see names for who's there. And number three, anyone can edit and check the minutes that we're producing in Hedgetalk, and there should be a link to that on there's a link to that in the meeting, certainly in the meeting materials for it. And that would be superb. I also put it in the email that I sent earlier this week. So I am not sure how close attention I'm going to be able to pay to the chat and to the queue and the slides and things like that. So if anyone notices anything that's popping up in the queue, popping up in the chat that really should be mentioned to the BOF community and discussed while we're here having a BOF, please like I say, again, anyone can step to the microphone and take a look at that or let us know that that's happening. Now, agenda bashing. Hearing none. Let's do a chair overview. And I gave myself 10 minutes for that. And we'll have it. I'll make sure that I do that over here. So welcome to Yokohama if you have not been previously welcomed. So this is the background for the VCON proposal. That there was a white paper, link is here. There are open source projects implementing VCON listed here. I did not realize, I did not know about the third one until last night, and just I also discovered that this is being done for UNICEF, so that's interesting. VCON was dispatched at IETF115. They said create a draft with the use case and problem statement to clarify scope and take it to a BOF. The draft is at this link, including the problem statement to clarify scope, and take it to a BOF is what's happening now. So I asked the proponents why they brought VCON to the IETF, and this was the answer they got back after, as we had the conversation. Relative to the network stack, VCON's connecting two disparate levels. Connections are created low in the stack as a result of physical activities with networking, security, and real-time concerns. They're consumed high in the stack by various applications. And from the two possibilities of where a standard could be defined, the privacy and integrity issues at the lower level are more challenging. So bring them to the IETF. Second, for the lack of an interchange format, conversations live in silos. Therefore, all of the bad silo things happen, such as poor governance, transparency, lack of centralization. So the idea being that IETF being the silo killer would be helpful in joining information across silos. And the third one, this is already being considered by, likely to be considered by multiple SDOs. The proponents are in conversation with people at W3C, and from my quick take of what VCON is about, I can easily see this being of interest to other SDOs as well. So the goals for this BOF, we are intended to form an IETF working group or not. We'll be asking RC 5434 style questions about that. Each question will be in the form of a poll, and people who disagree with the apparent conclusion are invited to explain why for each question. I want to say that this BOF is not intended to wordsmith the proposed charter. It's intended to capture errors or omissions, gaps in the charter that should be mentioned, suggesting how the proposed charter should be amended is just fine, because the amended charter should be clear to the community and to other SDOs. It's not intended to be this BOF is not intended to be a IETF working group, so we won't be talking about solutions or architectures here. If a VCON working group is formed, they'll be doing that anyway. Any questions? I should also be looking at the Meet Echo screen to my left, but not seeing anybody. Oh, okay. I am seeing someone up there. Thomas, are you putting yourself in queue using the Meet Echo tool? Oh, that. I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Please. This is why we really try to have two off chairs. Just saying.
Your mic's not on.
Mine was not on. Yeah, that's switches on top. Pull it towards you.
Ah. Oh. That better?
Yes.
Yay, all right.
Yay. Okay.
Technology.
Excellent.
Well, good morning.
I'm setting you a 20-minute timer. Just so
Thank you, Spencer.
Cool.
All right, great.
Go.
Great, thank you. Advance the slide, please.
Absolutely.
We're going to be talking about two use cases here that represent the two fine young men tugging on the rope. The first that we'll be talking about is personal data privacy. And the other is fill in your term for the robot, for the piece of software, for the analysis thing. It's the tension between these two efforts which really the VCON hopes to manage, to record, to be able to address as conversations cross security boundaries. So next, please. So here are a set of use cases that I'd like to just go over very quickly. The first is privacy and customer data protection. And these use cases here came out of a work that I've been doing recently. For my company, we are in a supply chain of customer contact in the automotive market. And I see these use cases every day, all the time. The first is one company sent my customer recording to another for analysis. This is something which happens in my company. Car gurus, Ford, Chrysler, Daimler, all the time has leads that they generate from their corporate office, either through customer conversations, email, whatever real-time thing it was, and they send it down to my company to make the first customer contact. So first question, how am I assured that the conversation that I have received from Ford is accurate, it's real, it's not faked? How do they know what information they sent to me? Well, they know it because it was recorded in the VCON. Related to that is, very often when I'm going through security reviews with enterprises, they ask me, what the security stances are and go through the basic things. But someone at some point says, do you collect personal data? And I know it's actually a very, very fluffy term if they say that. But my first thought always jumps to be, well, I'm not sure we can define it as the same thing at the same place. For lack of a definition, we don't know what we're talking about. If you gave me a conversation, and then I can make assertions about what's inside of it, and third-party tools can make assertions about what's inside of it. Next, what machine learning models is my data used for training or testing? So this is very timely. When we started this last year, we didn't think it'd be as timely so quick, but I guess it is now. VCONs have the ability to, inside them, to capture and record interactions with analysis like artificial intelligence, sentiment analysis, transcriptions, redactions. This allows us to save inside this VCON the pieces of software that have touched this data, even as it crosses down through a chain of custody. And then finally, I want to talk a bit about switching carriers and being able to take the data that you generated from one communication system as you churn to another, and to export it, and then to re-import it into your new phone or your new platform. And then how much time we got here? What am I at?
I'm showing 10 minutes.
Sounds great. All right. So before we and the last one is, and this is something that I found personally, we have a small company. We have 170 people in it, but we have 5 communication systems. We have a chat system, we have a phone system, we have a dialer, we have an inbound dialer. Nothing unified. The ability to take the conversations across a number of vendors and then to consolidate them in one place allows me to have a governance option I couldn't have had otherwise. Are there any questions about this before I kick off to the next one? I have 20 minutes. I want to make sure I have enough time for both sets of questions. Just keep going.
Yeah, yeah. You're
No
fine.
one's fine. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Next, use case 2. Integration of conversations analysis services. This is probably on the other side. If the first part was know what you got, know what happened to it, and have some authority around its integrity and its contents. The second is this allows us to integrate this into conversations analysis services. Again, AI, whatever you want to call it. And this is getting more into the application side, as we said before. The VCON standard is really intended to allow low-level systems to feed other high-level systems, and they tend not to be put together by the same companies, so they tend to cross networks and they tend to cross companies. The ease of integration of these services is something the VCON enables. It's in a format, a JSON format, which is native to the web, native to application developers, easily secured, easily encrypted. It defines a standard by which I can modify the conversation and then provide the modified conversation with an audit trail back to where the original was. So I can redact a conversation and provide a redaction without losing the chain of authenticity that the redaction was made from the original VCON. It allows me to answer definitively what customer data exists in a recorded conversation. It's getting back to when I had the say what kind of customer data do you collect? Well, the fact of the matter is nearly every call center records conversations, whether or not they use them, they've recorded them. They are full of information which is yet to be gleaned. So there's a lot more we can learn from these conversations, even though we haven't really analyzed them yet. And the ability to express what we know of in this conversation is critical to be able to say, I know it's in this conversation. And then another thing which happens a lot is the number of different modes. We tend to have a very siloed communications world in terms of the modes that we use. Our voice systems don't talk to our video systems, don't talk to our chat systems, don't talk to our email systems. And so the ability to have a single interchange format for the applications that covers all of the different sorts of communications modes is also very valuable. One interesting use case here, which is related to this. When we did the white paper, we found out there's a lot of people in the market doing transcription services that are in countries that have very few speakers, unlike Spanish or English or Chinese. There's a very small set of speakers. VCONs allow the ability to have training sets, to be able to have organizations that put together ways of testing text-to-speech algorithms that don't exist today, and then to improve those over time. Yeah, and one other thing here. One done?
I lied to you. This is how much time you have left.
12?
12, yeah.
Great.
My apologies.
It's okay.
Sort of.
So one of the interesting things about the VCON is, and we're not going to get to the actual protocol of it, but I want to tell you why it matters to this use case. There are 4 parts to a VCON, generally. The recordings, and that's the obvious part. The parties, those people who said were in the conversation is the other, I would say analog, real world part of this. And to that, one of the things that we also don't have is, and the VCON begins to address it, and I believe that is something that we should be thinking about now, but improving in the future, is the identity of the people in the conversations. That identity as related to not only who you are, but who says who you are. It's a complete identity chain, such that, you know, we can authoritatively say this person's in this conversation. And that's really important, as my friend Eric Berger would point out, for things like 911 and public policy, and to be able to export conversations in legal settings. And so the integration of conversations analysis services is our second use case. So I think I'll stop it with that. I think that's enough of that. We actually, oh, sorry, we had a couple other new use cases as well, right?
Yes, we did. And you
Yeah.
had slides on that.
Great, yeah. So Rowan had some nice use cases. Thank you, Rowan from Wire. The first one was, you know, there are many instant messaging applications which have many clients for the same user, laptop, mobile, web, etc. To be able to share that message history from an existing device to a new device is important for customer journey, important for I'm going to a new place, I want to bring my conversations with me, and that's one. The other is it's also nice to be able to authoritatively say, in this conversation, here is all the things that have been said in it, in case you missed it. Right? Again, it's a way of turning the conversations into data. Right? Next.
And
That's it.
that gets us to here, but let me stop for just a second. Well, okay. Actually, let me go ahead. So asking Dan to come up and talk about the proposed charter a little bit. The thing I wanted to say is that use case 1 and use case 2 on these slides are taken directly from the proposed charter. So they are included in Dan's talk by reference. And if we need to scroll back to let people look at them when we're talking about the charter, that's a fine thing to do. Let me reset you. And you were also 20 minutes, right?
Yep.
And you should be able to see that.
Oh,
Okay.
awesome. Next slide. So I'm going to walk through some other parts of the charter, and would love to you know, get input along the way of how we can make it better. So just the introduction of the group overall is, you know, we've talked about all this conversational data, right? There's the party and you know, what may have been called you know, call metadata or CDR and that sort of data. There's the actual conversation itself, whether it be text or audio or video. There is, you know, analysis. There may be ancillary documents. Maybe, you know, if it's a video conference, I had a slide deck that I presented, or you know, I had maybe a legal document, a non-disclosure agreement that was in the context of that call. These are all things that are kind of related to that conversation, and so this is kind of the scope of things that we view that are part of a conversation, and these things tend to be spread, you know, out, you know, throughout the enterprise or the service provider who may have hosted these things may have this data, but I want this in my enterprise because you know, even though it was hosted elsewhere, I kind of want that data for some reason over time. And so the idea is to define this a way to organize this conversational content, and to be able to also have the ability to have integrity on that data, that I can prove that this was you know, this is a conversation that occurred, that this is this hasn't been faked, hasn't been modified, hasn't been altered in some way, and to have the ability to you know, be able to protect that data if it has, you know, personal identifiable information or other sensitive information. I want to be able to encrypt that thing and protect it in some way, so that I can control the access of who actually gets to look at that data. And so our goal here is to provide a solution for that, right? Next slide.
Next slide.
Yeah.
Cool.
Um,
I see that, I believe I see, yes. Got Jonathan and Mallory in queue for questions now. And
Wait till the end, or?
It's up to you. Is it?
You've got, you're good to wait till the end? Okay, cool.
I'm gonna make a comment suggesting like removing things from the charter, so if I can wait till the end or do it now. Well, just go through it, that's fine.
Yeah, let's go through it and
Yeah,
we'll take
cool.
they'll make it easier for the note taker.
Works for me.
And so the goals would be to define a container for this, and to define the mechanism by which to provide integrity and privacy of that container. Next slide.
This is where use case 1 and use case 2 appear in the proposed charter. So like I said, these are things we've seen and we can go back to if people have questions about them as we're discussing. But
Yeah.
they are in the proposed charter now.
And just along that line is, I mean, I think we're only just starting to get, I think some traction in terms of visibility. And so, I think we have a small set of use cases at this point, and really invite, everyone here to give us more use cases. I guess, we're not going to update the charter for all of those, but those are things that I think that are important to capture, and they would go in potentially into an ID if, assuming we go forward with the work group.
We might update the charter for them.
Well, not all of them, I guess it wouldn't be exhaustive.
Yeah. So looking for good summaries of them.
Yes.
At some point. Cool. That works.
So what's in scope? The container, right, is in scope. The method to use, and I don't think we're inventing anything here. I think we're using existing IETF technology to specify how to provide integrity and how to provide encryption. The other thing that I think should be in scope, and that may be more controversial, is identifying media types that may be missing. Not defining them, but to identify media types that may be missing to enable us to appropriately construct a VCON. Let me give you an example. So one of the, I think, common things that we label or have been calling analysis is a transcript, right? So if we look at here, we're in a video conference now, right, through Meet Echo, and it's being transcribed almost real time here. But that in some conversations there may be PII, personal identifiable information, in there that I want to label and redact, because I can then take that VCON, a form of that VCON, to maybe give to a broader audience, and still have that be useful. So I may generate a transcript of my audio, run it through some tool to identify PII, and then redact the text. But I've also got audio and video for that conversation, and I have to redact that too. So having a standard way of having time related or time labeled transcript allows me to easily would allow me to easily redact also the audio and video, right? Just using the text as the redaction labeling mechanism. There isn't a standard way right now for presenting transaction information in that kind of format. I mean, there are a few things in terms of closed captioning and things like that, but that might be, that's just like one example of the type of a media type we might identify as be very useful. But again, I don't consider the defining of that media type, but just identifying the requirements. I would like to see that is in scope for the group. Out of scope, algorithms and methodologies for transcription, translation, analysis, all that kind of stuff. That's, we don't want to own that. That's somebody else's problem. There's no reason for us to have to dictate how that should work. Real-time streaming or updating, right? This is intended as a way to real-time, transport communications is not new. Our RTC protocol. This is a way to capture things after the fact. I mean, there's no reason you can be updating it, during the conversation, but it's not intended as a real-time transport. Any sort of transport mechanisms, database storage specifications, that's all out of scope. Next slide. And so milestones, getting back to a container, which we can provide integrity and privacy, and recommendations on media types that we may want to or may be useful in the construction of VCONs. I think that's all I got, right?
So this would be a good point for people to get into queue and ask questions. So I have Mallory, and then I have Jonathan. and they're being very polite.
Do you want to come up?
Mallory Nodal, Center for Democracy and Technology. I had a few comments related to the scope. So one is what you have already as out of scope, saying that you won't talk about transport and you're not going to talk about storage. But in the white paper, that's about the only time you ever talk about encryption or privacy mechanisms. So how are you going to be introducing those things if you're not talking about transport or storage?
Well, I guess meaning that we're not how we're describing a media type, right? And it basically, right, the container is a media type. And how you transport that, or whether you store that in a relational database or how you actually store that, it's kind of out of scope, right? And the fact that I mean, a media type is media type. I mean, that's that mechanism, or that's we're defining the protocol aspect of that in terms of what what is this media type, right? What is the container?
Are privacy considerations in scope or not?
So yes, I mean, in that sense, I think I see where you're going. The policy and the management of where you put this and whatever is kind of out of scope in the sense that we can't dictate. That's not IETF, right? I mean, that's it. The ability to create a container for a conversation that can be protected, for integrity and privacy is in scope. And we hope that we are making it easier for these enterprises to be responsible to store these safely and redact or destroy this data by having this container, right?
So one thing I was looking for also was a discussion about data minimization and redaction. So you've talked about it. You haven't said it in terms of data minimization, but I'd love to see more of that as an interesting privacy approach. I'll just give one example, and then I have one final comment, I'll be done, which is just by virtue of a person having a conversation with some entities is in of itself quite a risk. Let's say it's a helpline. maybe seeking out an abortion, or you are accessing mental health, and there's a bunch of stuff that
Yeah.
just the fact that there's an entity that has been in discussion with you is itself concerning. So so data minimization, I think, would be an interesting, because that does sound very much in scope. I still have
Yes.
concerns about the fact that you're talking about privacy in the charter, but you don't actually seem to have any way of fulfilling that. My last comment then is about, because when you say other use cases, you actually just link back to Rowan's comments. And I think from an end-to-end encryption perspective, well, one, we're already talking about that in several places in the IETF at the moment, so I don't know if that's a great idea to bring into here. But there would be some attribution, authentication, replay attack issues, probably with being able to send like a bunch of text that came from someone else in a context of an end-to-end encrypted message. So I would trouble those as maybe not use cases that you want to work on right now. That's just my 2 cents. Anyway, thanks. That was a long.
Mallory, before for the second point that you made, could you, and it doesn't have to be now, but could you give us some thoughts about what you think should be in the charter to address the issue that you were raising?
Of privacy and encryption. That's kind of what I was asking, because it's in the charter, but I don't know how you're going to actually do any of the work that you say will happen in the charter. That's why I was coming up on the mic to understand what you mean, because when I look at your white paper and when I look at your slides, that you can say that you're working on privacy, but I don't understand how you're going to achieve that.
Yeah, that's okay. I understand that. And just so briefly on that, the idea is that by being able to define the conversation authoritatively, you can define what's in it authoritatively, so that your privacy and your redaction and your analysis efforts are trackable. The results oriented. You can actually know that you did it because you know what it was beforehand. So it's much more of a definitional thing to enable privacy than it is anything else, right? It's, if you know what you got, you know what you don't have, and therefore you can have comfort in what you've redacted or privatized.
Okay, we're good. Are we good? So, Jonathan?
Yep. Hello. I'm going to take this off to speak. Jonathan Rosenberg from 5.9. I was taking notes. Jonathan Rosenberg, 5.9. For context, some of my comments, this is one of those rare occasions where IETF 100% overlaps with my day job. 5.9 is a cloud contact center provider. We send billions of minutes of recordings between different vendor systems. And so I very much understand many of the problems involved here. And I'm trying to understand whether this is aiming to solve some of those problems or not. My first comment is actually on the privacy aspect of it, where I find the document a little bit confused about what it means by privacy. And in particular, I think it's confusing two different things. And this is what we were talking about on the side before. One is, if I were to build, as a vendor, if I were to build my system inside my box, wouldn't it be cool if I had like all my recordings and stuff stored in one place, so that like if I wanted to delete it because someone asked me to delete it, I just go to that one place to delete it. That's great. But because it's inside the box of a single vendor, it doesn't really need IETF standardization.
Right.
I think we're here to think about exchange of information between vendors.
Correct.
And so, I find the document mixes some of that up. So for example, one of the things you talk about for privacy is like, oh, I can keep track of or know like what models are used to train my data. Okay, well, that's an internal consideration. Like I as a vendor who provide a contact center system, I want to track who I've sent my model to. I don't need an IETF standard to do that. I can just do that. It only needs an IETF standard if I want to exchange that information with someone else. So my question, that's the question, what's the scope here? Is the scope that I want to exchange audit logs, meaning I want a format that says, this is what happened to my data. On October 25th, it was sent to Google. On October 26th, it was sent to OpenAI. On October 28th, it was read by Bob, in the process of a customer support ticket, so that an auditing system, third-party vendor, could use my API and get out that information and export it from my system. That's one notion of privacy, but that's not protecting privacy. This is, I think, sort of Mallory's point. It's just logging what it is.
Yeah.
Now, there's a totally different thing, which is what I don't think that's what your doc is doing, because it doesn't actually, unless I missed it, have such audit log in it. The alternative definition of privacy is like, oh, well, yes, we're exchanging recordings and I want to keep that confidential and thus encrypt it. And so I protect users' privacy by encrypting the exchange of recordings between vendor systems by making the format itself encrypted. Those are totally different requirements and things you'd put in a spec. Which of these things are we doing in this for when we talk about privacy? That was long.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I think the answer may be we may be doing both. I mean, it's definitely the latter.
the encryption.
And yes, and possibly the.
Did I miss it? It's not in the
Yeah,
draft,
yeah, so-
right?
Yeah, can I get to that one?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's the section of the VCON called it's called an analysis, which is meant to capture the interactions that external systems have had with that piece of
Right.
software, which can be used for auditing, which can be used for that work.
But
So-
including like an audit log is not the same as including like the transcript or the summary generated by a third-party system, right?
That's correct. And the analysis section of the VCON is fairly opaque. So you would
Right.
be able to use
But
it.
that's not useful, because if the purpose, we're here to write IETF standards to facilitate interoperability between vendor systems. So to me, the use cases are in terms of vendor has this type of thing, is doing this type of processing, other vendors doing this type of processing. That helps us understand the minimal viable data we need to pass between them to get useful interoperability.
That's correct.
If the purpose was, Thomas and Dan say, okay, what we want to solve for is you have a contact center vendor and there's another vendor, call it an audit vendor. I don't know who those are. We don't work with any such. Maybe others do. But let's say there was such a thing called an audit vendor and it received audit logs. That's the problem we're trying to solve. You'd actually need to define what's in the audit log, the date, the actor, the processing. You need a long enum of the things that are being done. If it was just opaque, then it doesn't actually facilitate that use case.
Yeah,
right?
so the opaqueness is in the content of it, not the source tagged or who it was. So it tries to split the middle between capturing that information, which is valid for that auditing analysis, yet still have a structured way of managing which systems and which pieces of software have touched the conversation.
Okay, so what I think you're saying is, no, I misinterpreted what you just said. It's not opaque in that, like an audit log, I would expect to say who did it, when they did it, what did they do?
That's
And that has to be not opaque.
That's
You're
correct.
saying that's not opaque.
That's not opaque.
Okay,
But you know, the output of what they did
Is opaque.
is opaque because
Okay.
there are just too many.
Too many of them. Yeah.
right.
I mean,
Transcription.
Okay.
Not send them in or.
All right. The other thing is that they're, again, depending on what you mean by audit, if audit is in scope, this is my charter comment, it uses the word privacy, it should delete the word privacy and either use the word audit log or confidentiality. So depending which way you want to go. So I'm going to park that and make my
Great input.
second,
Great input.
okay,
Thank
my
you. Yeah.
second main comment
Yep.
is now like definitely putting my vendor hat on. I have a problem, right? Again, I do this day in, day out. This is what our company does. It's what all the other contact center vendors do. I can speak this with great authority. They ship recordings between systems, and their most common case is between a contact center vendor and what's called a WFO vendor. And there's several different use cases for WFO, workforce optimization, stupid acronym, doesn't matter. One of them is quality management. So if you call up the contact center and you hear your call is being recorded for training purposes, right? What that means is we send the recording to other vendor systems that like allow someone to listen to the recording and rate the call.
Right.
And right now there are no standards for that interchange. It is intervendor. We exchange with multiple different vendors. Is that a use case in scope for this?
absolutely.
Okay. The current spec does not contain nearly enough information to facilitate that use
Yeah,
case.
And love
Okay.
to know what that is.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right.
Love
Yeah,
that
please.
use case.
Please help.
Want
What-
data.
But is that relevant to whether this box is for?
I'm trying to understand what's the scope of the work. Like if I come up and I say, oh my gosh, you're missing field X because without that I can't connect between my contact center and WFO. I want to understand, do the chair say it's out of scope or it's in scope because we're trying to solve that use case with this format?
And-
That's why it's a charter question.
and-
So that's in.
and-
Absolutely.
and-
Okay. All right. it gets more complicated.
Always does.
I mean, that's why I'm trying to ask how much these parameters you want to swallow. These all add additional parameters.
Yep.
For example, in the quality management case, we need a lot more information about the agent to facilitate this process. Like there's agent groups, like they all work for the same supervisor.
Yes.
So that structure information is not currently present, would need to be added.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so the next use case is this in scope? Another use case is workforce management, where these other systems track like how many calls do the agents take and what types of calls, so they can analyze them to suggest, oh, on alternate Tuesdays, you need 20 more agents than you had last week. Okay, there's a lot more data in scope for that communication exchange, a lot more. Do you want that? And then the most expansive, where you probably should say no, that this is in scope, is exporting call detail records for analytics applications. There, like when I look at what is inside our call detail record that we put in our database, that our APIs currently export, there's like 10x more information in those than is currently in the draft. Call attached variables being one example. Every contact center has the idea of variables. It's information that's collected during the IVR and during the call. Their key value pairs, their type, their strings, their enums, whatever, their name, they have IDs. There can be hundreds or even thousands of them in call. We have people who have thousands of these things in a call. Do you want, and they're enumerated in our CDR. Our CDRs are huge. Everyone else who builds a contact center does the same thing. Are those in scope?
I would say, I don't know,
Okay.
maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, but QM, yes, the rest maybe is what I'm
Maybe,
hearing.
yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So if I could just do a chair interrupt on, like I say, focusing on what the charter might look like if amended. Jonathan, that was super helpful. Are you?
Yeah, I'm suggesting charter amendments to include these specific use cases. The use cases
Yeah.
are general purpose. They don't allow you to constrain the scope enough. If you said, hey, this is a real, we want to make sure that it works in scope, allowing the vendor of a contact center service to send a recording to a quality management bracket QM system that allows people to rate the call and includes all the information needed for those systems to fully interoperate. That's the kind of thing I was asking should get added to the charter.
Yes.
Much like Mallory's previous comments, that's enormously helpful and specific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Colin.
Colin Jennings. I guess I work for a contact call center vendor, but I don't understand it. I want to talk about back to somewhat leading on Mallory's questions for privacy type of stuff. So the actual draft, we have all these objects that have whatever data in them, and it's clear in the draft that we can take each one of these objects and encrypt them and deal with them, right? And I think that's the right sort of design, and I think it's very important that we be able to encrypt some of them with different keys than others. So if we had a list that I considered to have certain PII, maybe they would be encrypted in a way that one vendor could read this, but another vendor couldn't. It's differential. I think see you guys nodding. So my question is, we didn't really manage to get that over into the charter at all. So how do we get into the charter some language that basically says these VCONs are going to consist of a bunch of objects. Those objects are going to be encryptable with different keys, and that is really the fundamentals of the fundamental mechanism that we're going to use for dealing with the privacy on a lot of these. And maybe that's not even correct. Like, correct me if I've got this wrong, but
I mean, I think you diving a little bit into the design or implementation and saying
Fair.
that these objects are encrypted. There's different ways. I mean, without doing like a Merkle tree type of thing, there's different ways of we might do that. And I don't want to bring that into the charter here. That's
oh, okay. Could we get some language in the charter about what we're trying to achieve by whichever technique we do that gives us the sort of privacy guarantees we're looking for here? That's what I'm trying to poke it at. So suggestions on what text we might use for something like that?
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I would love to.
So here's the thing.
That's where we said privacy, right? It needs to be expanded into something.
I agree. Privacy just becomes too vague, right?
Yes,
Like, let's
no,
go.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't disagree. I would love to have text to help us expand that.
So here's the thing, and this is the opinion of Spencer, take it for what it's worth, is that by coming to the IETF, these folks with other proponents are coming to the IETF saying, we want to work in this space, but we want to meet the needs of people that are not us. And so it is enormously helpful to have the input that this group is already providing. Thank you, Cullen, also. And basically say, what needs to be in scope, what work needs to be done, and I think a decent amount of the comments you all are getting is what additional work would be helpful in using the encapsulation that you came here to do. So thinking about thinking about more use cases, and thinking about maybe a little more requirements in architecture as well.
Well, I'm not worried at all about the use cases. This is so incredibly useful. This work is going to happen even if IETF absolutely cancels it, right? I mean, that's the basic problem here. But what I am interested in, so I'm highly supportive of this, but what I am interested in is, well, what are the concerns that IETF has about doing it? Like the first slide that presented in this block gets to exactly the essence of the primary concern. So what's the best we can do to answer that concern? And I think what we're proposing is not bad here. I'm pretty happy with it. We just didn't quite get it. We need to shuffle it into the charter. And so maybe would words, I mean, it's unreal. We're going to wordsmith this at the mic, but it may be the right thing to do for something like this. Is along the lines of, all of the data inside of the VCON will be stored in objects that are can be individually confidential. The confidentiality of them can be individually protected, and the access to those can be controlled separately on who it's being given to. Okay, that was awful what I just said. We shouldn't use those words, but that's what right. Okay, so I mean, do other people in the room have, like, would that make people pretty comfortable or not comfortable? Is there better ways to do this? Like, this seems to be a fundamental problem to poke at. So I'd love to hear from anyone else on this one.
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you. And next in queue.
I don't know if I'm actually next in queue. It's my first IETF, and so I don't know the protocol, but my name is Sebastian Bentel. Where? Who is it?
Sebastian in yellow.
Hey, I'm right.
Perfect. Excellent.
Excellent.
We should probably put that on the chair slides for the next IETF.
Oh, right. Okay. Got it. So, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So, Sebastian Bentel, New York University School of Law. A few questions about like the internet draft. Apologize if these aren't well formed for like the charter scoping protocol. One, are you really talking about conversations, or is it just communication exchanges more broadly? Like there seems to be a semantic difference there. Conversation is a little bit more sort of socially loaded. Like if you're talking about a communication exchange, that's a bit broader and might reduce some of these kind of social concerns around privacy, et cetera, depending on how you're trying to scope it. Related to that, the insistence in the internet draft that there's one human involved seems like, how could you accomplish that at the protocol level? And to what extent is that short-sighted, given how many chatbots, et cetera, are happening? Sorry.
Indeed.
Yeah. So, like, if you do have one human involved, you do definitely implicate all the legal stuff around consider maybe data protection as a broader, but in some ways more precise term than privacy, in that it seems like where the EU laws has already gone, the federal bill in the Congress now, the ADPPA has data protection in the name, it might be spreading. In that case, questions about like consent of participants for purposes of the data use would be a really great thing to include. Consider like an online conversation with a chat representative where you've already signed off on your consent to the information before engaging in the conversation.
Yeah.
Like that would be a good thing to record, and I think would lower a lot of sort of anxieties. And then the last one, I'm thinking about just a use case. Say there's like this microphone in this room, and the footage gets taken. There's an extraction of the conversation from it. There's sort of a provenance step in determining like the boundaries of the conversation. The same raw footage could have multiple sort of conversational outputs, and I was kind of wondering how you're imagining that.
Yeah, so all great questions. So from the very first, around having a human involved, and is it a conversation or a communications exchange? That was, I'm sure, emotions and emotional opinions coming through the draft, which is identifying that the interchange is the problem and our data protection is the goal. So that's basically why those words were used. And the other thing about conversation versus that is I feel like the VCON is a way of defining the conversation. It's kind of like a Word document. It's not something you can derive. It's something you have to define. This is what I mean by the conversation. This is what I mean by it. So that's why I was using the word conversation. I could have used the word but that was the intent of it. Secondly, very much so in terms of consent and being able to track the provenance of who said what. One of the ideas of the VCON is there's attachments, which are pieces of media, digital assets, which are in relation or context to the conversation. For instance, I think consent is a really good example. In my company, we stick the lead in the attachment so that when we look at the conversation, we know what they were talking about, right? And then I think data protection is a fantastic term. Love that. That makes a junk ton of sense to me.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Sebastian, that was an excellent question for a first-time IETF attendee. Keep up the good work.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Joris. So the format is currently named VCON, and you also mentioned VCARD and JCARD in the spec. And I just want to encourage you, there's also new work going on in Calext that's related or building on top of VCARD. And it might be nice if maybe the format, once it matures more, might be aligned with JS Contact, which is hopefully soon to be an RFC.
Oh, great.
So just wanted to give you a pointer to that
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think, looking towards the future, I think one of the most fruitful areas of what might happen next, maybe not now, but next, is the better identification of the parties that are involved in the conversation. And that sounds like the perfect thing for that. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Hans-Jörg Habel, Adriga. I'm by far not an expert on this domain of exchanging data for analysis and so on. However, I understand from Jonathan's comment, there is already a lot of stuff going on. So what I was wondering a little bit or missing, or maybe I overlooked it, is how is this done right now? Yeah, so it obviously seems there is data exchanged with the WFOs in some way. So, and I think that didn't happen yesterday. I also understand VCON is nothing which you already use in a way and now got to standardization, but it's something entirely new you want to develop, right? So I wonder a little bit, how is practice right now? I would expect there is informal standards already to a certain extent. So what can we learn from them? What is the problems? Yeah? So this aspect probably would help me a lot to understand better how this fits in. In particularly, something I have a little bit of knowledge about is migration. So there was this migration use case, and I couldn't entirely understand due to the fact, because certainly there is formats to export data or interchange data for migration in certain scenarios already. Yeah, so it was totally unclear for me how VCON would relate to that. That's probably a minor thing, but the overall thing is probably, the overall question is rather like, what is related work here actually?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to answer your first question, or focus on that, is just every vendor has their own solution, right? I mean, that's kind of where we came in, right? It was the initial stimulus for this is to try to improve the ease of integration.
So since vendors seem to interoperate in anyway, so I understand that. So they do that on a end-to-end basis.
It's a custom engineering project every time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and these are the silos that we're talking about, you know, and I think Dan's being very kind and saying these are vendor solutions at the moment, because again, in automotive, and I'm from networking telecom. I just landed there a couple of years ago to do this design. I'm telling you that it's awful. It's everywhere. They have recordings in CRMs and they can put on a sticky note. They would. The state of data protection in a lot of the mid enterprise is just non-existent.
Okay, so final comment on that. I understand now better, I think. Thanks. Final comment probably is nevertheless and worthwhile to point that out probably a little bit more, and maybe give an example of at least, I think there are probably 2 or 3 dominant or more excessively used vendors or scenarios where this is used. I think that would help a lot somebody who is not so familiar with the domain to better understand that, because that seems to be a crucial driver also for the effort, right?
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you. Yep.
If I could just ask a question that people can talk about in any way that they'd like to. It seems to me like one of the things that an IETF working group that is chartered has the opportunity to do is to produce drafts that are useful to the working group, but may not live outside the working group. Usually the examples we have are use cases and requirements documents. It sounds like producing a document that includes, even collects these use cases to help people understand what's being done here, because I have the impression that not everyone has the experience of some of the people in this room as far as, like how it's done, how things are being done today. So to help people who don't do this all day long, every day, understand what's being done, adding a milestone to at least produce a internet draft of use cases where those could be collected and feed into the rest of the process. I think that might be useful, but thank you.
Chris Wend, I think my comments are sort of aligned with that. I think bringing up the word privacy to me is sort of a Pandora's box that maybe the call center industry might not want to open that box quite yet. I don't know. I don't know the industry as well as others, so maybe I think identity also is a potential Pandora's box of issues and things like that. I just wonder, you have a lot of interesting, just the media formats and how you organize that, and just encrypting the data is an interesting enough problem already. I think, like, maybe take baby steps and start there, and then add the frameworks on top might be a better approach.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think in terms of, at least there's certain parts of the identity we already have there. We need that. I mean, it's identifying a party. Identifying the line. The phone number. Maybe using STIR to identify the phone number that they came in on. How was was the person validated in the call center? And what method of validation was used? Not the answers to the to the validation questions, but the method that the user was validated. I mean, I think it's stuff that is in scope and needs to be part of the spec.
Right. I think I was identity identifiers themselves and mapping those is one thing. pulling that back with like stir and other things might be a bit more complicated. I think identity is less of a problem than privacy. Privacy of derivatives of your voice and all that stuff, and passing them back and forth is.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Yep.
Thank you, Chris. That brings us to Art.
Jaime Jimenez. Hi, guys. I think the work is very interesting. Particularly, I'm interested on the API exposure part. So, for example, if you have an existing product that exposes conversations API, a conversation, basically a chat history, for example, how much of the things being defined in this working group will be in scope for that API exposure? Like, will we offer, for example, implementation guidance on how to expose these JSON containers, or what kind of, the media types are there, but like, for instance, resource types, resource structures, I don't know, like what is in scope and what is maybe left for the developers?
I mean, I think, we're going to define basically a MIME type, right? With a JSON object, and, how you expose that, or how you transport that, through some RESTful API or whatever, that's out of scope.
Out of scope, yeah.
That is out of, okay.
Out of scope, yeah. And just to make sure we're not confused. So the VCON library is in GitHub. It's open source, fully open sourced.
Right.
And along with that, it's a reference application that uses VCONs as a reference application. And that does have an API on it if you're talking about that layer of stuff. But that's out of scope here. All we're just talking about is the standard itself.
Okay, thanks.
Cool.
Am I next?
Jonathan? Yes.
Okay. Jonathan Rosenberg, 5'9". So to answer the prior question about what do people do today, like I said, we exchange billions of minutes of recordings, and what happens is it's by, you're going to love this, FTP. And it gets worse. It gets worse. We recently upgraded to SFTP, so that was an improvement. It's really bad.
Can I just ask that we pause for a moment of silence in memory of the privacy that we thought we had?
Well, I mean, Contact Center is a different beast, right? All the privacy people don't want to hear this, but like, it's lots of software whose goal is to analyze your call. Like, there's no. And obviously, right to be forgotten is supported, as we do and other vendors do. But like, this is what happens, right? You're recording, you're transcribing, you're analyzing. I mean, just today, our company announced we have a GPT-3 based call summarization of calls at agency. It's more and more processing your data. That's what the business is. But anyway, so it's FTP of generally WAV files, and the main metadata you need is the timestamp. So common industry practice is to use the file name includes the timestamps in the file name. So back to scope, like, this could be monstrous and this could be tiny. I do think it's going to be important to define what's the minimal thing we're going to do first that supports a particular use case where you could say vendor A and vendor B today do this proprietary crap. And if we had enough, then they could go to this standard format and use that to define the bar. Because otherwise what you're going to find, and you already have found, is like, there's a gajillion use cases for recordings and calls and whatever, and like, you'll have unbound. When are you done with the work? When have you met your requirement? And there's, maybe you're doing all of these, maybe you're just doing one of them, but I do think like getting to the point where you understand the specific real practical use case, where you could point at vendors and you say, these vendors already integrate and today it's proprietary and this is going to replace that helps you define what the scope of the initial standard is, I think would be helpful for success of this effort.
Thank you,
John.
And just having timestamps and IDs of the users and participants for recording exchange only would probably be a pretty good one. Already an improvement over this FTP stuff.
Thank you.
Would love use cases, and would love if there's any public APIs that you can point to that we can say we intend to encapsulate or replace this. That would be fantastic.
Wouldn't it be great? This is so bad, I kid you not, where many of the vendors in this space, these are like not even, many of them not even SaaS products historically. Their APIs are literally file formats that are, you upload them by like putting them on the disk and triggering a file write. I mean, this is the starting point for a lot of these systems today.
And if any of those are, publicly shareable, would love to have them.
And so, like I said, the thing with one of the things that BOF proponents get is a better understanding of how they fit into the rest of the world. They come with an idea, but they don't know all the places that idea is relevant. So this is terrific. I would also say the interested community, does have a responsibility to help tune the charter text. I see that Jonathan has proposed text for a use case description in the chat and said he would send it to the VCON mailing list as well. Jonathan is doing great, and please be like Jonathan.
Okay.
So we have drained the queue, and we're doing terrific on time, which I'm also thrilled about. I had prepared questions that are in the chair slide, that are in the slides for this session, that I'd like to amend for the purposes of our conversation. For example, we did that, and it was about 20 minutes. This is the best BOF I think I've ever seen. I know that Francesca is in the Meet Echo, and is one of the art area directors, and ask her to chime in for anything that I'm getting wrong. But starting here, so for the question, is this problem well defined and well understood? I want the theme you will see on these on a couple of these polls are, is this headed in the right direction more than is this completely ready to send off to the ISG for work group formation? Let me edit a couple of these as I'm doing polls. And for anyone taking notes and helping to take notes, I'm going to be asking for us to record numbers when I say polling for, that's basically a count. And then for these, I would say, anyway, let's just kind of roll through here and see how we go, okay? And it will take me just a second to arrange each poll, which I learned how to do not very long ago, but I did learn how to do.
Feel great. You note takers learning how to use your editor.
Okay, I'm going to be asking people to you guys, I swear. And this is that, and
This is on the first question.
Yeah, and like I say, let me get the right text up there for you all, so that you know what you're raising your hand for, which the people who have already put in entries did not know, because this is the IETF. How do I start a new one? Do that. I end that. And okay, so please behave for just a second while I put in the new information here. And I'm asking, is the problem headed towards being well-defined and well understood?
Heading towards or is?
I mean, you're kidding, right?
Charter as written.
Yeah.
I can't find the tool on this. Could we just hum on this?
No, this is the problem as has been discussed today, which is I think helpful discussion that we had. So I'm saying, taking that into account, is it headed towards being well-defined and well understood? And I will invite people to put in entries, and
It's the Mideco page for,
We should all be in it on our devices.
it's like the page where you would click the button to ask to be joined.
If you go to the agenda,
The little dot.
and go to the and say,
Online.
I'm in the room tool.
There's also that Freddie.
just to make sure that I understand what's happening way in the back of the room, are we having a quick chat about how to respond to polls? Okay, Pete,
The tutorial,
nodding
yes.
his head. Okay, excellent. So let me give the people who were participating in that conversation a minute to do that, and I'll just wait and watch for the number of participants to stabilize. I think we are mostly stable, so I think I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And I saw that Yari put himself in queue. Yari, what's up?
Jari Arko Eriksson. So just representing one of the persons who voted no for this question. So I think this is a very interesting area, well worth for IETF to address. And I think the area is well defined, and I'm hopeful that we are on our way to get there. But I think the discussion showed that, like, the exact details of what use cases that Jonathan, for instance, was talking about isn't yet encoded in the charter. So that's the issue that you guys need to work on, I think.
I could not possibly have said that better. And so like I said, I'm asking you guys to take into account the conversation that we've had. So some of the things were, as amended by the discussion we're having here, that question probably should have been as well.
Yes, you have an AD at the mic.
Hi.
Yari, you can just thumbs up or down this. The stuff that's missing from the charter is understood. It's just not present yet. Is that right? Thank you.
And thank you. So that one I'm calling 30 yes, 8 no, if I'm reading that right. So okay, this is getting easier now as I'm looking at it. It turns out that it's easier to start the second poll than it is to start the first. So I'm going to be asking, does this problem as amended by discussion, need to be solved. So let me see about opening that one. And I'm letting this run until such a time as.
That's right. Good one.
So this is looking like it's stabilizing. Does anybody else need to raise hands?
This is Barry Leba. I just find it odd that this problem needs solving has more votes than the problem is well understood. Just commenting.
So let me end this here, and let me say something responding to Barry, which is always terrific. I should have asked under the first poll, if not, what else would make it well-defined and well understood besides what we've already talked about so far? Does that make sense? And is there anybody that needs to get in the queue to say what else needs to happen that we have not already talked about? So let me give people a chance to think about that for a second and then come to queue. Especially if you were one of the 8 that was saying not headed towards being well-defined and well understood yet. Anybody got anything to share there? Hey,
Hey, Hans-Jörg again. I can just repeat what I said before. It's about the related work.
I'm sorry?
The comment I mentioned before, like I fail to understand what's already there and how it relates to that. That's what makes me difficult to understand. What makes it not well understood for me.
Okay, yeah, you're basically just saying you want to look at charter text, actual text, rather than.
What is the related work in the space?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yes. Perfect. Yes. So actually, let me say one other thing, because this was a BOF and I started helping fairly late. The charter text has not changed since the BOF was approved, because it seemed to me like I should be asking people to look at the proposed text that had been approved. So yes, so thank you for saying that. One of the things I did talk about with the BOF proponents was the awareness of other SDOs, but you're also talking about other work, and that's terrific. Thank you. Anything else? Cool. So if we are past that one. So for the problem that we're talking about here, is the IETF the right place to solve it? And go. Is there anybody else that needs to raise a hand here? I think we may be stable at about 30, so that would be 24 yes, 6 no. And is there anyone who was saying no want to talk about that? Hi, Brian.
Brian Gondwana. Hey, yeah, I think the reason probably not to do it at the IETF is that it didn't sound like there were many of the people who are involved in transmitting this data present here. So my question would be, how are we going to create something that's going to be used if we don't have anyone involved in actually doing it here? And that really wasn't addressed in the answers to the questions. When the where's the related work question came up, there was no, we know the people who are involved in this. So there's no point. Yes, there's one. Yes.
So we should be recording this in the notes as a high five from Jonathan to what Bron just said.
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was
we
not good at
usually have
figuring out.
the BOF cushion, Spencer, along the lines of how many. I mean, we use this immensely. I mean, we send all kinds of stuff to voice recognition systems, ML systems, otherwise, right? So we're a huge user of this type of technology, and maybe we should just ask the boss questions of like, how many people. Are there people who would build it, use it, those types of things? I mean, that's the heart of what you're getting at there. Is there people who understand the requirements that are needed?
Yeah, and seeing that we are still adding significant use cases to what we're talking about, then that's still going to have a impact. It seems like to me that's going to have an impact on our ability to say, are the right people in the room. I have more questions. Yes. And we can talk after those. So I got Hans and Mallory in queue.
Yeah, Hans here again. So basically just rephrasing of what was said before. I think maybe one can rephrase it in another way. So the question is, I understood there's a certain domain-specific part to that, even though we have quite some people here around which are in that area. The question is there probably people in the industries that are not aware of the IETF, or is there a liaison institution for that particular domain which probably needs to be involved at a certain stage in this? I think that would probably be a useful question to address.
Okay.
Mallory Nodal. Mine was hesitation around, in the early part of the slides, there was a statement made that this work was also being presented in other standards bodies. That was said a couple of times, but I didn't hear any further elaboration on that. I tried to see if it was in any of the W3C lists that I'm on. I couldn't find it, or at least it's not very visible. So I guess it's more, okay, the question is also what other parts of this work might be happening in the IETF elsewhere? What parts are going to be happening in other SDOs? What are those SDOs? And what is the mapping of issues in various places? So I don't even think we've had that conversation, but it was alluded to that maybe we should. That was the only reason I didn't raise my hand.
We're having a quick shuffle to see who's actually going to stand up at a mic. Okay, somebody cracked. Good.
So We have heard from representatives from other organizations that tell us that they wish to track it and to get involved with it, particularly in the W3C. But nothing formal has happened yet. That's why we say likely, because we were getting pinged by them.
So these are side conversations?
Side conversations, yeah.
Okay.
Nothing formal.
I think the question is there other formal standards activity you're pursuing outside of IETF?
There is not.
Perfect. Thank you. Excellent. Moving on slightly. I'm going to be asking, is the proposed charter as amended headed in the right direction? I'm sorry? No, we were still talking about the problem space and things like that. So this is actually looking at the charter that we looked at and thinking about the discussion we've had. Is this headed in the right direction? Pete, is your question a question that would be good to ask now, or?
Yeah, I was just going to respond with regard to this. Part of the reason I put my do not raise hand there, and I think the reason you're getting somewhat weaker response is because it can't be known at this point. There's not enough meat in charter unless we count some of Jonathan's suggestions about use cases.
And that's exactly what I meant by it.
And even there, there's not enough yet.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot to be done here yet.
Yeah. So, and I understand that. Let me end the session because it seems to have stabilized at 16:06. So what Marie can jump across the thing and tell me that this is not what's happening. But what I think is happening is that the BOF proponents are taking the feedback that they've gotten and proposing new charter text on the VCON mailing list for people to look at. So I don't think that they're asking for a blank check on that question, but basically just when they look at the meeting minutes and the feedback that they've gotten, what should the charter text now say? Does that make sense? Great. Have you thoughts?
Do the proponents feel like they have that feedback in hand, or do they need to ask the list for more details?
I mean, I feel like we've got some, concrete, actionable things to edits to make to the charter at this point. I'm not feel comfortable. Would I like more input from people? Absolutely. Yeah, it's not right. So anything more that you can contribute to the either in the chat here in MeetEcho or better yet to the VCON email list. I would love more details on the things that people said. So and that will let me do a better job of editing the charter.
I apologize, I was heads down for a few minutes there. Did you already do the who will review drafts, who will all that sort of thing?
That could be coming up very soon.
Thank you. I'll get
like disturbingly soon. But I have one more, and I think it is really important to talk about this one as amended, being discussed in the room. Are the proposed deliverables as amended close enough to be useful? I think what I've heard is that we really need a good use case document, at least for the working group to use. You know, rather than trying to continue to collect these use cases in the charter. So adding a deliverable for the use cases would be one of the amendments that I think I've heard as far as deliverables go. But let me invite people to stop listening to me and work on the poll. Oh, good. I was hoping I had not confused people more by explaining things. We're still close to, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll on this one at 15 yes, 6 no. And closing that. Stuart, did you want to say something there?
Hi, Stu Card, AX Enterprise, and I should have said this previously, but I was struggling to keep up with typing the minutes. I'm involved in the drone remote identification protocol working group, and I see tremendous applicability of this to capturing conversations amongst air traffic controllers, pilots of crewed aircraft, remote pilots of uncrewed aircraft, and anybody else who might be involved in an incident that requires, for instance, a subsequent inquest. So I'm very supportive of, this for that reason. And this is a comment I should have made way earlier in the conversation, but I couldn't keep up. Also, if anybody said anything in the chat, I eventually fell off the bus and didn't capture everything from the chat into the minutes. I know the chat is being separately recorded, but if anybody said anything in the chat and really wants it in the minutes, go to the editing tool and put it in the minutes.
Often, speaking as somebody who takes minutes in the MEDECO age, it is often true that people can do a better job of capturing their part of the discussion in the chat by putting it in the minutes themselves, rather than by having somebody else try to explain what would happen. Rohan.
Hi, can we please get to the last two questions?
Yes, absolutely. I think we're on. I think we are on who will do the work in the working group questions. So let me do that. So please indicate if you are willing to review VCON documents. And I'll give us another minute for the poll to run. We seem to be stabilizing at about 18 people who are willing to review documents. So let me go ahead and end that. I'm asking this question a little bit differently than the way it is in the slides. I'm asking, please indicate if you are willing to contribute text to VCON documents. So let the poll run for just another moment. I've got about 8 people that are willing to do that. So what I said about this in the slides was, please confirm your willingness by sending an email to vcon-chairs@ietf.org. And then last question is going to be, please indicate if you are willing to help lead the VCON working group either as an editor or as a chair.
Don't hold that one. Put her hands in the room.
Okay, so the follow-up on that, and we don't, okay, so I'm not going to ask that question. I'm going to
Just
invite.
one quick question before you jump into that. Is the previous one closed or not closed? Because it's confusing because you have 2 up at the same time. I think the tool's broken, but whatever's happening.
I have not started the second, the other one, and if it's still running, I should have ended it. Yes. Thank you, Colin.
I didn't catch it.
So I think it is reasonable for me to stop.
There were 9 people who said that they were going.
Yeah. And then, oh, good. Oop, up there. The follow-up there was also just sending on helping to lead the VCON working group was sending an email to vconchairs@ietf.org also. So that one I don't need to poll particularly, but please do that if this is where you think this is headed. And if you're thinking about that, I would encourage you to participate in discussion on the mailing list as we're tuning the charter text. I think that this is where I hand over to our area directors and let you all tell us what you've heard and what you think the next steps are.
I mean, I think I heard was that there's work to be done on a charter. I think I saw accounts that were reasonable in terms of there's enough people who want to participate in supporting this. So back to the list for the charting work, and I wanted to make sure you had all the raw materials. You answered that previously. Does anybody want to nudge me in a different direction? Thumbs up.
So generally a thumbs up to Murray on that in the room. Excellent. Okay, excellent. So we've been through all the material that I was planning to talk about. So I think this is where I thank you all for participating in this V conversation. Yeah. And look forward to seeing people in San Francisco. Thank you.